One little thing from last time, I will assume that everyone who heard the tape and what we were talking about having to do with all secondary info being tied and based on self-reference. I'm just sure that almost all of you, to yourselves, thought, telling what kind of guy one is the supreme form of self-referral. Now on to new matters. Legend, myth, I don't have time. Make it up as I go. Here it is, though. If there were gods, human type, as everyone's old nervous system, your forefathers and mothers used to think about, humanly describable, mortally, anthropomorphically related in some way. You know, the run-of-the-mill, all religions, their ideas of God. If there were such gods, ask yourself, what would it be? What would it be that the gods would want from man? Obedience? Fear? Worship? Submission? No. Sorry. I apologize to all the religions now, but no. You know what they would want? Enthusiasm. You trust me. You listen up. Enthusiasm, the most conducive condition for the circulation of energy in the secondary world we're talking about, of course. Man's world. In a full secondary sense, a man is not really a man. A man is not being as a man without enthusiasm. Now, as always, we're talking with words, you've got no choice, a certain kind of graduation, a certain kind of relativity, etc. But enthusiasm is a singular attribute to man. It is, in its singularity, however, a reflection, and it is based upon, extended from, older primary needs. As long as it started out having a certain patina, I guess, of reference to matters religious, let me point out that if we had a situation of such gods as we were describing, from their view, enthusiasm would be the only, or it would be the supreme, it would cover it all, moral good. There'd be nothing else to talk about. If there were such an arrangement and there were such gods as I'm describing, you would not have to worry about 10 commandments. You wouldn't have to worry about 2 commandments. You wouldn't have to worry about having all of these great meetings of church leaders and coming up with... There'd only be one standard. There'd only be one real moral good. Enthusiasm. That's all the God or gods would be asking. That would be the simple demand. That would be the way to please. The demand for enthusiasm is the real force behind such things as nationalism, as a particular religion alliance, that is, you being a Christian or a Jew or a Muslim or a Buddhist. Enthusiasm is the force, the need for enthusiasm is the force behind ordinary man's devotion to his alma mater, to his hometown sports team, and, believe it or not, drugs, alcohol and drugs. It is enthusiasm is what is behind this. If you begin to get a glimpse of this, I might point out in advance, will explain why no one else can explain the very dicey, actually inexplicable nature on any reasonable basis of nationalism. Why people feel as though, and ready to die for it evidently, that there is nothing like being an East German. And someone else says, you're right, there's nothing like being an East German. Yeah. It's too bad that you people don't join the human race like us French. And they're ready to die for this. Their flags go by in parades and people cry. I mean, there's your spectrum, all the way from crying, falling down, to people ready to pick up arms and fight over what? And not just territory. Apparently fighting over the invisible, the intangible nationalism. People all over the world right now are catching knuckle sandwiches in the nose for having said the wrong thing about the University of Paris, Clemson, Notre Dame, the University of Toledo. And of course you can step aside and go, the people are nuts. They're not nuts. What is missing from ordinary views is believing, as you're supposed to do, that there is some reality that is definable. It's fairly well, I'm sure, detailed in any decent dictionary of what nationalism is, the love of one's homeland. And when I say nationalism, of course, I'm through in religion, all forms of great faith in your race. Boy, I love being a white Caucasian person. There's nothing like being a white Caucasian Presbyterian person, or there's nothing like being an Oriental Shintoist. It cannot be explained at anything resembling, by their own definition, not mine, not yours, by humanity's definition of reason and logic, how it is in this day and age, and how it was in other days and age, that people over here in one part of this planet are ready to die, do die, hollering about how great it is to be a Oriental person, how great it is to be black, how great it is to be white, how great it is to be a Presbyterian, how great it is to be a Jew, how great it is to have been born, in Italy. I'm ready to die for it. And you think, well, all the genetic sperm somewhere, instead of taking a particular trip of those few inches that your fathers did, if your father hadn't ended up sending his sperm off on that short trip right after WW2 in Italy, if he'd done it in France, you'd be French instead of Italian. And so people, they can think about such as that, but as always, there's nowhere to go with it at the ordinary level. The polarization will simply turn on itself, and intellect, quite efficiently with ordinary people, if it tried to follow this for a second, it just goes, nah. It has to dismiss it, because all it can do is continue to reverse its polarization. There is no reasonable, by anybody's definition in the city, reasonable explanation for this, for nationalism, defense of one's religion. Yes, I'm a so-and-so, and anyone who doesn't like it, I'll kill them. Well, that's a sitting duck, or to take shots at the Catholic Church and the Inquisition. Yes, we're here to help you people. If you won't be helped, we'll kill you. God is love. It becomes a series of non sequiturs, or it becomes a great fodder for a big old cup of cynicism and sarcasm. Grind it right up. What's missing is this, as always, a behind-the-scenes peek. I'm telling you what's behind all of this is the need for enthusiasm. And so it's got to come out some way. You don't see the efficiency. And so people, if you're staying around at a street corner in a bar and you wanted to see enthusiasm, and you saw a stranger over there and you looked him up and down, and let's just say that on the surface he appeared to be a Caucasian, a person of the white race persuasion, and you said, You made some insulting remark about white people, made a wasp joke or something, and maybe the guy didn't flinch. Then you look him over and you figure, all right. And then you start making jokes about Baptists, Methodists. He's just still drinking. And then you finally hit Catholic, and you see him do this. And he begins to become what? Now, you might use another word, but he starts to become enthused, such as, hey, what the hell? Who are you? What kind of joke is that? Did I hear what you just said? Hey, fun's fun, but don't be making jokes like that. Enthusiasm. And the ideas that seems to be inexplicable again, or people sometimes wring their little historical hands about all the folly of mankind, nations killing one another over the outdated notion of nationalism. It's not nationalism, it's enthusiasm. If the guy hadn't responded to a Catholic joke, you finally just go, I wish some of those foreign dictators, I'm sick of America. I wish they would just, we're assuming you're in the bar in America. I just wish somebody'd come over here and just wipe out the American government. They need the Germans or somebody needs to come over here and take over. And suddenly you see in the guy's nervous system, his brain, you see flags begin to wave, and he really becomes tense. The ordinary intellect cannot explain this in any way that seems to be, shall we say, at least charitable to human intelligence. Because it will say, well, this is ridiculous for people to be fighting over political ideas. They are not fighting over political ideas. That's why it is ridiculous. That's why it's inexplicable. It is the need for enthusiasm. Now, you got to be, some of this may flesh out in a few minutes, so don't be discouraged yet. Now you can be discouraged. Wait a minute. You would have to be, trust me, let's take this as a little game of logic for a second. If I am correct in pointing out to you that it is demanded in the secondary world of man, or back to my story if you like that a better way, if there were mortally based, humanly describable gods, or a god somewhere, the thing that he would be wanting, the one thing he'd be demanding from man is enthusiasm. So just take that as a given here, just for a little mythical second. And if we did away with the one's religious allegiance, nationalism, all forms of chauvinism, jingoism, if we did away with all that, and you were still the need for being enthusiastic, what would be left? Don't you see? It just so happens, since the mind can't start out and crank itself up on this basis, if we're talking about humans again, or human life as being this big old fat glove, and it's full of the ooh of life, the goo of life, and you, in particular, individual, are like a little pinhole. All of humanity is one pinhole, but you're a little pinhole, and the goo's got to come out. All right, the goo in this case, let's call it enthusiasm. It's got to come out. And if it's going to come out, and you're a human, you're a secondary human with a intellect going, the goo comes out, you're going to call it something. I mean, you could have called it goo. What's your religion? I'm a gooist. The goo's going to come out, the energy comes out, and humanity must call it something or it does not exist. Remember that that's part of the job of the intellect, is to see and to name. You are the final arbiter of picking up where Noah left off. Or was it Adam? Adam. You got to name the critters and the beast. So it would have to be something. It just so happens that it's things now, if it had been something else, they would be in the same position, but it's now that nationalism, religious alliance to the point that you're fanatical about it. All of that now, and for a long time, has had a questionable, if not bad, name. You understand that? The British, now in certain areas, certain parts of Europe, are banned from drinking, from showing up at certain hours or certain time limit before important soccer matches, because they're raising so much hell. And so the ordinary intellect can go, this is getting out of hand. It's bad enough that countries for thousands of years have been killing one another over hollering, well, I'm French, and somebody else hollers, well, I'm German. In that case, let's fight. That's bad enough, but now we got these dumb asses are killing themselves, rioting over what? Kicking around a little old ball. Jesus, how nuts. It's not nuts. If it wasn't that, it would be something else. Because we're not talking about sports. We're not talking about the fanatical, insane love of one's hometown and the hometown team, or one's religion, or one's race, one's nationality. What you're talking about is enthusiasm. And it just comes out this way. Had it not come out that way, it would have come out another way, and I'm not even going to bother, because anything I could say now outside the ordinary realm would simply sound funny and make you laugh instead of people fighting over enthusiasm. If it hadn't been, fighting over nationality, we could replace that. It could be enthusiasm and be fighting over the correct pounds per square inch that should be air pressure in your front tires. See? All you can do is laugh because anything I say now sounds silly. Notice, it either is going to sound silly, I can say, all right, if it wasn't nationalism, then people would be fighting over, that is the enthusiasm needed for secondary life, over what is a godly haircut. So you laugh again. It's either that on that end, or else the other end, which is deadly serious. So since that didn't happen, what we've got is what did happen. Remember, the great predictions, the great understanding. When it rains, it rains. And when it don't, it don't. So it was not over haircuts and the correct number of pounds per square inch that should be in the front tires of a decent human's car. It is nationalism, religion, race. And that doesn't seem funny, because you're surrounded by examples that at the ordinary level are not humorous at all. People have killed one another. They're killing each other right now on this planet. Oh boy, I'm sorry I brought it up. If it's not trash on the highways, it's people killing each other. God, I'm getting the blues and depressed. We're all done for. You see? It's not funny that there are people right now, people who are dressed up with suits on that seem to be reasonable human beings, and they're shooting and killing other human beings because of the color of their skin, because the other person says they're holding up a different religious icon. This is insane. This is serious. This is not funny. Notice the choices you've got as always. It's either this stuff that's not funny, or I say, all right, all it is enthusiasm. And if it wasn't that, it would have been something else. Well, what do you mean? What else could it have been? Oh, the nature of what is a humane haircut, a godly haircut, and you go, ha ha ha. It's either that, which now seems silly because it did not rain there, or where it did rain and it's still raining, is fighting over such things as nationalism and religion. And remember, fighting, I keep saying that to give you the hard attention-grabbing example, it is enthusiasm. And of course, warfare is just an extreme form of a temporary enthusiasm. It is. The enthusiasm, you might find it of some interest. It might help you expand your own view of it. All the enthusiasms of life are in some way, as always, everything in the secondary world. It can be traced that there is a direct link, I hate to say it, a connection. They're based on, is simply an extension, as always, of the primary world. For instance, should be simple to see, nationalism. Or I'll make it even simpler and sillier. This kind of fanatical, and I don't mean the extreme of killing somebody, but this kind of ordinary exuberance and passion that people seem to feel for their hometown sports team. That is a secondary extension of the primary territorial prerogative. The kind of exclusive feel of animals marking off their territory. It is directly grown from that. It is an extension of it. There's nothing that humans can do in the secondary world, no matter how wild your imagination is and how many LSD flashbacks you may have. There is nothing that you can, as we've been through before, that you can suddenly make up to do that is separate, that is in some way an abrupt new start, that is in no way connected to the 3 S's of sex, sustenance, and shelter, of the minimal primary needs in the primary world. All of it, nationalism, religious allegiance, they're all extensions of older primary necessities. As also here you might take note, it's observable, that in the primary world, you're dealing with a very spotty, periodic, if any, display of what could be called enthusiasm in the primary world. Hold it a second. In the primary world, let's take, instead of worrying about the primary part of your own nervous system, which you can piece together yourself in a second, think about the great observable world of animals. On our planet, on the 3D level, just animals, the other creatures, the inhabitants of the primary world. By and large, they sleep. I assume all of you know that's no secret. But when they do arouse themselves to pursue, as they must, to stay alive, the three big S's, the three components that are absolutely minimally necessary to keep the primary world going and to keep the creatures therein alive, when they do it, notice this, you know this. All you got to do is watch National Geographic a few times on PBS, and everybody knows this. Or watch Marty Stauffer, see if he changes his shirt. Once the animals do, that is, strictly primary creatures, the creatures of the exclusive, so to speak, primary world, once they do arouse themselves, they will operate on the basis of minimal effort. And no matter how you try to look at it and play anthropomorphic, intellectual mind games with yourself, really with no enthusiasm, because enthusiasm is an anathema to minimal effort. And minimal effort, of course, is synonymous with efficiency. In other words, a lion lays around and sleeps. I don't know what. Somebody watch National Geographic next time. They have a lion special. Well, they sleep 23 and a half out of 24 hours. Maybe 23 hours. Give them a break. Once they do arouse themselves every day or so when they want to eat, what do they do? Of course, I can start making silly games. They do not check the yellow pages to see who delivers or how far they got to go. They look out. There's a whole herd of wildebeest or attorneys or somebody. And they sit there, even though they're awake now, they just sit there and crouch in the weeds. And the attorneys and the wildebeest begin to kind of... And they will look until they find an attorney that has a wooden leg or his pants are too tight. I mean, a wildebeest that seems to be crippled or something. And they'll creep up real slow. And the rest of them, nice big old fat wildebeest can be running past them. They just keep to that one, the cripple, the one sitting there that looks off or maybe looks dazed like he's been taking drugs. They will operate what they're supposed to at absolute maximum efficiency, which is a minimal outlay of energy, because the more energy they have to spend to chase down a wildebeest, then the more wildebeest they need to eat to make up. So, maximum efficiency is minimal effort. I mean, I don't know why Newton didn't discover that in his laws. It was right there amongst the figs, but he should have. It is. And minimal effort, the reason I went through all that, minimal effort, no matter, without you trying to pin human emotions on a poor lion, you understand there is nothing resembling enthusiasm. They simply operate as they have to, like the rest of us, at the minimal energy expansion level. And that includes no enthusiasm. Enthusiasm, if a lion could be enthusiastic. I'm not just saying it to be funny, but if you tried to put human emotions now in a lion there, and he creeps out, and he sees them, and he jumps up and he hollers to the other lions back there. And you go, boy, there's a whole bunch of wildebeest, and in fact, out there in the middle, I think I see, if I'm not mistaken, it is a personal injury attorney hiding out there in the middle. And he gets all excited. You understand, he is wasting energy. What's that got to do with him eating? At the primary level, and of course not just a lion, But the primary level in a human, if they could arbitrarily be separated, which is of no practical value, but at that level, wherein variety is not the name of the game, wherein nothing is required, nothing is necessary, nothing is even needed, nothing is added. The lion would not enjoy his food anymore by being enthusiastic and jumping up and down and hollering, "Boy, wildebeest, my favorite food! Boy, I'm so sick of warthogs. I've been dying for a wildebeest." That would not, just trust me, that would not increase the pleasure of the lion's repast off the wildebeest. It would in fact have been a waste of energy to be enthusiastic. That's not a part of the primary world. It's not a part of the primary world with lions and warthogs and wildebeest, and is not really it's not an absolutely required part of the primary world in a man. But notice, in the areas where enthusiasm would be, is the requirement. When I say would be, if my story about the gods, my retelling, that what they would, or the God would require, the rest of that stuff that I mentioned, the submission and paying homage and worship, all that's for the people in the city. The real God, if he was that kind of describable fellow, all he would want out of humans was enthusiasm. And so this enthusiasm in the secondary level, I want you to see, does not just simply spring out of left field, does not come from the woodwork, does not come from man's imagination. It is, as with everything else, it is a natural extension from primary needs which do not require any degree of enthusiasm. Because in the secondary world, what we're talking about is a movement of energy, not the movement of non-neural breath, blood, food. At that level, enthusiasm has no bearing, does not add, and in fact, as I assume you caught from my stories, it would not only not add, it would be wasteful. But now back to man. Consider there is a kind of extreme beauty in the efficiency of the requirement in the secondary world of enthusiasm. And this certain kind of beauty that I had in mind was in its nature of being double-edged. That is, for every enthusiastic Irish Catholic is an equally enthusiastic British Protestant. For every enthusiastic Pakistani Muslim, there is an enthusiastic right across the border there. Indian Hindu. So whatever you start with, anywhere that you arbitrarily jump into the picture of the city, the secondary world, and you pick out a thing, a system, an idea, its opposition produces, offers just as many areas for enthusiasm as does the initial, the original thing, system, idea itself. You don't see the efficiency. You don't begin to see, it's not the last word, of course, according to what you can see, but at this area, right before people's eyes, the beautiful efficiency of the 3D world, and with the basic operating tools in the secondary part of the 3D world being the polarized nature of everything, that this is just another example. But I was going to suggest one of the more attractive examples of the efficiency at work, because here it is that man is absolutely required to be enthusiastic when he is actually being a man. When you're less than enthusiastic, and I know people are, but at times you're being less than enthusiastic, you are being less than a full-blown human. If this God did exist and he suddenly popped into your neighborhood or into your house while you weren't being enthusiastic, he wouldn't really have to say anything like, "Tut, tut," because as soon as he popped in, you'd go, "Uh-oh." Even if you'd never heard this, you wouldn't know why, but you'd realize something's wrong. You'd probably jump up real quick and go, "Oh, I'm glad to see you. Oh, can I get you something? What would you like? Do you have a long trip? How's the weather back wherever you come from?" So you wouldn't have to ever heard me talk about this tonight, but you would have known just being in the presence because the demand would be there. The energy demand that, hey, if you are not being enthusiastic, you're being less than just minimally cooperative. You're serving just even a less purpose than a distracted lion. It is the double-edged nature that whatever it came out as being. In other words, there would be, look what you had lost. What if the National Football League only had one team? That's it. The Chicago Bears. That is the National League. Anyway, let's assume if we just got one team in the league, let's assume that the good people of that part of Illinois could still get enthusiastic. They'd still be out drinking. They'd have their little caps and, jerseys. They'd have their heroes. Oh yeah. Oh, but think about this. It just struck me. What if, let's say, drop on down a little southeast. What if over, let's say Pittsburgh. What if Pittsburgh came up with a team? And so then the National Football League had two teams. Do I have to continue this little drama? Do you understand? Would anybody have to go into Pittsburgh and say, now look, maybe somebody from Chicago and say, now look, we've had this league to ourselves now for all these many years. It's been enjoyable. We've all been kind of, enthusiastic about it up there in Chicago. But now that you guys got one and we're going to let you in the league, we want to give you some lessons on, how to be, how shall I put it? Well, maybe the people here in Three Rivers, maybe you could be, get enthusiastic. Get enthusiastic about the team. When we come down here to play you, get enthusiastic. Holler out, yay for our side. And maybe, within reason, holler boo for the Bears. Like that. And then, I tell you what, then when you guys come up here, don't take it personally, but then we'll get all enthusiastic. Well, we've already been enthusiastic before, but now we'll be more enthusiastic because it's not just us now in favor of our guys. We all love them. We all try to dress like them, and we'd all like to be as big as they are. But now we can only be enthusiastic in favor of them. When you get here, we'll be enthusiastic a little more, like we'll holler across the field. You guys throw on that side. We'll holler, the Steelers suck. Don't take it personal. Do you see the beauty? Except ordinary intellect. This is not all funny, by the way, because you get over to the area that humans think it's real serious. And some people can get past nationality. It's not that one's better than the other. But you get to religion, many people, and they go, wait a minute, this is not funny. I mean, this is traced back in my ancestors, all my forefathers. We've always been Jewish. I've always been Catholic. I can trace my parents back to one of the popes, my grandparents. Well, never mind. Even I don't want to go into that. But do you hear, this is a little, well, I'm sure you people do. The same kind of little scenario I just said with the mythical cities of Chicago and Pittsburgh and that ever elusive, legendary National Football League, you would have the same situation. If we had Muslims, that was all. That was the only religion in the world. And I don't mean everybody was Muslim. Let's just say that normally what's called the Muslim countries. How about that? The Middle East in general. The Arabs. The Arabic Middle East. And that was the only religion in the world. And let's say that they were really kind of passionate about it. And if you went over there to visit and you said, okay, you guys got a religion. They said, yeah. What do you call it? We call it Islam. Well, what do you think of it? I like it. By God, I like it. If you ever want a religion, why don't you come try it? I mean, is it really fun? Yeah, I like it. Maybe they had little banners, yay Allah or something. Do you understand, though? There would not be the same enthusiasm if that was the only religion. Now you come up with Judaism, and the Arabs, the Muslims, are even now more enthusiastic. Now, of course, now it comes out at the ordinary level is, well, wait a minute. It comes out enthusiastic because they're trying to kill each other. Well, give me a better definition of enthusiastic. And, of course, I am not here peddling homicide on an individual or a nationalistic or religious level, but that is a fact. It doesn't have to get down to actual bloodletting, as long as they just, because you would normally assume that we are more civilized than those British hooligans, so that Chicago and Pittsburgh fans do not actually run across the field and try to kill each other. But you know, I was being a little laid-back facetious. You know that they will get out there and scream across the field and make obscene gestures and all that. And, of course, they might turn out later, and the two people walk by and somebody says, Chicago, my brother lives at so-and-so. In other words, they've been hollering at each other there for 2 or 3 hours and doing all that, but you understand, it's a game. Christians, Catholics against Protestants, Jews against Muslims, Hindus against Muslims, all that. Now, it's very serious at the ordinary level. But surely you understand, it's the same damn thing. There's no difference. With ordinary people there is, of course. And I'm not going out and say this in public. But it is the same damn thing. Except nationalistic and religiously, aside from some of the World Cup soccer playoffs, not just the Brits, but besides that, it's only nationalism, religions, I guess that's about it, isn't it, that really seems to, according to all historical surveys and contemporary observers, well, and sometimes racial conflicts, but it's really all becomes the same thing. It's only that seems to inspire or would seem to lead to actual bloodshed. And so, from that view, that is certainly a different ball game than a ball game, right? It's certainly a different matter in Lebanon, what's going on between the Jews and the Christians, between different factions of the Christians, that's a different thing entirely than simply a soccer game. Yeah, it is at that level. But behind the scenes, what is going on, there is no difference. No difference. It is the need for enthusiasm. It is the need for the primo, most conducive conditions for energy circulation. You could take, I'm not going to do it for you, but any of you who want to think about it, just it shouldn't take you but a second. All of the great dictates, all of the truisms, all of the great religious calls to arms, all of the great slogans of the world, what are they actually saying? Now, they will sound like, if you only listen with your ordinary intellect, they'll sound like that they are talking about religion, they're talking about decency, morality, nationalism. They're talking about one thing, enthusiasm. That's what they're talking about. Except ordinary intelligence has got to hear everything on the basis of it being connected, on the basis that the words actually have some specific meaning, and that meaning only. But behind the words is the need for the most conducive conditions for energy to be circulated. And lack of enthusiasm is not a conducive condition. It is the classic examples in history of actual armed warfare, one country attacking another, the wars and the rumors of wars, the threats of wars, the sable rattling, then the actual sable sticking. But let's say before it even starts, the danger, the fear of one group, one system, let's say one group, like one country, to another, is not their politics. It's not their religion. Let's say it's politics. It's not their politics that frightens. It's their enthusiasm. The initial danger of an Attila, a Hitler, a Mussolini, is not their politics. It's their enthusiasm. Nobody can see it. Well, they see all that's necessary. That, hey, there's this guy Attila, and he's got this horde of Huns. Is that a dance troupe? No, no. And they're across the river, and they sent a messenger over, and they said, Well, they asked who we were at first, and I sent back and I said, we are the civilized Romans. Haven't you heard of us? And they sent back a note and says, our name's Attila, and we don't even know what the hell civilized means. Have you ever heard of us? And we sent word back, yes, as a matter of fact, I believe we have heard certain rumors about you. And anyway, so he sends word, and he says, I have no interest in what you call civility. We have no culture. As far as I can see, across the river at you Romans, everything you're doing to me looks like a whole bunch of sissies. It looks like a bunch of dunderheads. But I like the way some of the stuff shines over there. It's attractive. So we're planning to come over there and take everything we want, because our philosophy is not democracy, republicanism. We don't know what the hell Pax Romana means. So we're going to come over there in the name of Attilaism. All right. The whole point of all that, they did not look down. All of the great Roman thinkers, philosophers, the George Will of that day, they did not sit down and try and analyze, what does this mean? They were frightened, but you make a mistake, or you miss behind the scenes. To say, well, what they're frightened is Attila sent over word that he's going to come over and impose his will, that their political philosophy is anarchy with a twist. The twist being, it's anarchy for everybody but Attila. At any rate, so they would say, and history would repeat, and they're correct, of course, in the city, that the danger is, the fear that the Romans had is of his philosophy, his politics. It's not. The initial fear in all cases, all the way from that to two people, to somebody jumping out of an alley and saying, God damn it, give me your money, or they just stick something in your back. Now I begin to shave it. I know that your ordinary intellect sometimes wants to argue with us, and it's not right or wrong, it's just whether you can see it. The fear, the initial fear, is not the other person's, this other group's politics. It's not their exotic religion. It's not their strange economic theories, but let's say their politics. Or it's not this guy's uncivilized politics. That is, your politics is you don't do mayhem. You don't forcibly take people's possessions. You don't threaten them. So this guy that jumped out of the alley, whoever he is, and he says, hey, give me your money. And there's something in your back. He says, I'll blow your goddamn brains out. It is not the other opposing philosophy or the politics on a national level that is additionally dangerous and frightening. It's the enthusiasm. That's it. Whether you like it or not, I'm going to take a second and make you think about it, or else you can try and stall and think, in your head baseball scores so we don't have to actually reach a climax. Don't use Boog Powell, though. Well, this is always very hard to talk about. Well, it's not hard for me to talk about, but it's hard to talk about in such a way as to try to slip it in past old intelligence, because old intelligence is running off the kind of enthusiasm that has run everybody, all of your mothers and fathers and all of your kin, all of humanity, and you're trying to slip past that absolute need. It's like me trying to get you to breathe in a way that the lungs are not prepared to breathe. At the widest level, those things that seem to be of gigantic historical and contemporary consequence, the battles of opposing philosophies, political philosophies, which right now is going through an ebb. But look at the religious warfare that's going on all over the world, the threats and actual combat going on. And it's nothing but the need for enthusiasm. And the fear, is it supposed to be? I'm not questioning that. The fear across one boundary of religious or racial or nationalistic, of one group to another, the fear is the enthusiasm of the other one. It's not the fear of their philosophy. But you understand, that's not true. Not at city level. There's no way that that's not true. Because any possibility beyond that in the city level, if I could take ordinary people's intelligence and make them see, well, wait a minute, what you said is correct. that that's not what's going on, which explains why it can't be explained. But then ordinary intelligence, I'm stretching reality, of course, couldn't do this, but if it went that far, then ordinary intelligence would be left with, well, wait a minute. What that means is that none of this has any meaning, which, of course, would make everybody in the city go bonkers. Everybody would suddenly act like a British rugby soccer fan. The point it can't see is what I'm trying to point out, that there is a purpose behind it. And the most efficient way I know to map it right now in English is the need for enthusiasm. Patriotic enthusiasm, religious enthusiasm, even hometown National Football League franchise enthusiasm, enthusiasm for drugs, for drink, for your possessions, not your primary utensils, not your home and not your actual clothes to keep you warm, but possessions. Men must be enthusiastic about their possessions. But again, the double-edged part of the enthusiasm that I say is what actually frightens one group. That the French were not frightened by Hitler's philosophy to start with, or his politics. They were frightened by his enthusiasm. Not just the French, but everybody. But the double-edged part is after that, then what became, in the sense to say, well, World War II, then to take another example, then you have got one enthusiasm finally produces another as a double edge, and so then you had the enthusiasm, let us say, of a Churchill pull the fat out of the fire for the British. Was their saving grace. Was even if one group can see that, wait a minute, all we're fearing to start with right now is not their philosophy, not their politics, it's their enthusiasm that's frightening. Their energy is going to overwhelm us. But then, as they must, then they will use the matter of enthusiasm to motivate their own people to resist it. Of course, it comes out that this side said, well, we're right. God's on our side, or Allah or somebody is on our side, and so we'll prevail. What prevails is whichever was the most enthusiastic, and may I suggest that the people have very little to do with it. Don't you like the term very little? Maybe Pogita sounds better. All right. Ponder this then. A very specific way that life keeps man enthusiastic in the secondary world is through variety. Change and variety. It is thus you have another area that is a sitting duck for some parts of life's body that is wired up and drafted to play smart-ass, cynic, critic, social observer, whatever, in a certain area. And I had in mind what, I guess, easy summed up as fashion. Because what you're dealing with all fashion, all fads, all forms of hipness, coolness, up-to-date terminology, all forms of pop culture, pop music, just the whole world of fashion equals enthusiasm. Now, I know that there are people who have made some sort of small living, or at least sold a few books, over attacking fashion. I don't mean just clothing fashion, but fashion. The world is full of nice, educated people who are respected that just poo-poo the whole world, for instance, of popular music that they point out. How many college educators, how many Nobel Prize winners do you see at a Rolling Stones or Motley Crue or Two Live Crew concert? That's because people of some substance, people of some intelligence, people of some culture understand that tradition is what life is about, what society, what civilization itself is about. Pop music comes and goes, which is true. But they say, you go down to the symphony, you go down on a Mozart night, you go down any decent night, perhaps not with that contemporary claptrap, but the old masters, nowhere past the Romantic period. You go down there, and there is where you will see the creme de la creme of your city society. The reasonable, the movers, the shakers, and all that, and the pepper and the salts. And they're correct from that view. I mean, they got me again, right? The world of fashion, that is the world of change, wherein that something is popular. Heavy metal is the popular music for a certain demographic cut of one society, and then a year from now it is neo heavy metal. And those from another part of life's body that are wired up to be critics and etc. What it is, they are less enthusiastic, and as you might note, the age difference at a symphony concert and a rock concert. But their attack seems very well based. It is accepted in the middle class, the middle age of every city, that is of life's body, that fashion, fashionable music, fashionable clothes especially, being hip, you got to have your hair cut this way one year and then another way the next year. All throughout history, it's nothing new. There's always been the satirists, always been the critics, and sometimes quite intellectual, quite literate, and able to really to pop culture of all kinds. But pop culture is variety. It is enthusiasm. But notice, this cannot be proven to those involved. The ordinary intellect can't see it. I could say, well, you do not see enthusiasm. Oh, you see a standing ovation for a Bernstein now and then, or an Ashkenazi, especially somebody, one of the brothers that were dead, if he showed back up. You'll get a standing ovation, but you do not see the enthusiasm there that you would at a rap concert. And of course, they could say, well, give us a break. The sophisticated people talk like that. They'd say, well, we all were there together. We know and we appreciate what Schubert did. No, we're not going to get up. We're not dancing in the aisles, and plus we're not on those horrible drugs or drinking, not until after the thing. And so then they say, plus there's a bunch of kids. And it probably should be stopped anyway. They're probably either doing immoral things or thinking about doing them later. Tut, tut, tut. It is a difference in enthusiasm. Did anybody listen? It accidentally showed up tonight of Karut mentioning that death comes with no enthusiasm, which is why it is death. It is the ultimate lack of enthusiasm. It is. And of course, death is not normally, not in general, an instantaneous abrupt affair. Not, as they say in the newspapers, unless you die before your time. If you die statistically around where you should, you die gradually. And I don't mean just when you got sick with lung cancer 6 months ago. You started dying, a long time ago. You started dying when you became less enthusiastic. But it's all gradual in the city. It's all relative. It's all acceptable. Because you can start dying at the age 20, but you're still serving purposes right to the end. You're going to be serving necessary purposes at the primary level. You can be laying there in a coma, and you're still distilling, refining the energy of glucose, whatever they're feeding you to keep you alive. So you're still operating at that level when you are absolutely unenthusiastic, when you're absolutely not circulating any energy. Life, don't worry about a doctor or your brother-in-law, life pulls the old plug. And it is the ultimate, the final lack of enthusiasm. But between here and there is what I was going to try to get you to see. The world of fashion, the world of being with it, being hip, which of course mainly, historically, seems to be, well, mostly limited to the young, which is part of what makes it funny to see a would-be middle-aged hipster. A guy that's 45 years old with a hairpiece that just barely fits, and he's dressed whatever the latest is with his shirt open and the gold chain, everybody understands that something's wrong. And they can make observations like, well, he's out of place, he doesn't belong here, which may be true enough. But what I'm telling you is, he is feigning enthusiasm. Or he may be, even going, hey, and overtly being enthusiastic, but those with which he is trying to congregate and fit, they know that even if he is enthusiastic, if that's not all a show, which has got to be partly a show, and they're correct, but even if it's not all a show, he still shouldn't be doing it. What the hell is he doing here? Not just literally, metaphorically, what's he doing here? That is, what's he doing trying to be that enthusiastic? Well, if you ever wanted to see, try and judge yourself the kind of degrees of civility, of being civilized between two groups of people, is the degree to which they are attuned to and seem to be tied to fashion. And even right now, just all over the world, you could look at a city right here and then look at the further on, even past the suburbs, into the more rural areas. Now, in the city, part of being sophisticated, part of being civilized is to be attuned to fashion. You don't have to be an absolute slave to it, as they say, but to try and fit in with whatever's going on. Try to drive a decent-looking car, cut your grass, have a haircut that's not 200 years out of date, have some clothes that seem to be within the last decade purchased. Whereas, it's almost a near fanatical the closer you get to the enthusiastic group there in the city. The younger, the people who are still enthusiastic about life, there is a oftentimes near frantic enthusiasm about life from one view, and that view would be the one out there in the rural area, whereas you find the rustic elements are getting closer to the primary world. There's no great enthusiasm. I mean, how enthusiastic does a farmer get over his plot in life? Well, since I was that dirty, unless he was, of course, about half potted. I mean, where do you see farmers, talking about their profession, their job, the same way that you would staying around a bar, people talking about being stockbrokers? The excitement of being out there on the floor, working the exchange in Chicago. A farmer, the closer you get, or the further you get away from the enthusiasm of the more advanced areas, just in the mechanical sense of civilization of the secondary world, the less enthusiasm in the secondary sense they have. I mean, a farmer just has to do his job. What's there to be enthused about? Is he going to get all excited that, wait a minute, have you seen this year's new color in overalls? Yeah. They told me I'm out of time. Bye.